Now we move on to lesson 6 about applying transitions and effects. You're going to, first thing you're going to do is switch to a new timeline, right? O3 transitions and effects, you're going to load that in. You can Shift Z if you want to expand it to see the entire viewer. When you do this, you can then come in and you can switch back to your big trim view just to give yourself more room. So layout, presets, big trim, load your preset. Now you have a lot more room to work with effects. You go right into your trim, your timeline view options, and this is a little bit different than Resolve 14 if you're used to it. Make sure that you've previewed what it looks like now. You have your 3 buttons that were up the top now are here in the middle. All you really want to do here is increase the video track to make it larger. So we're just going to increase that all the way up to the right there, and then you can close it down. The first thing you're going to do is add in a fade up. So you're just going to teach them about fading that up. It's only about 10 frames that you're going to fade in, so you can drag it in a half second, 10 frames, whichever you like. You're going to go to the third red marker. 1, 2, 3. It's going to bring you over here. You'll actually see the note that in the marker it says add a cross dissolve. And what you're going to do is add a cross dissolve at the end of this shot into this Kenya shot. So, and you can show them how to add a transition. So select it like you're selecting a rolling trim. Go up to timeline, add transition. Now you have a crossfade in there. You can zoom in to see the name. In fact, you want to zoom in at least far enough to see the name so that you're able to select it. And you can play through it just to show them what the crossfade is. And if you want to drag it, you can stretch it out or shrink it. There's not a lot of handle there, so you can't drag it out too much, but you can shorten it to about a half second again, and you can play it through it and people can see it. Any more than that, you're going to want to select it and open up the inspector, and we can talk about the inspector again. This time you have transition presets. If you want to say start on the cut points, you can show them how it starts on the cut point now. And you can change it to a film dissolve, and you can show them how you can say ease in and ease out, and the icon's going to change, and you can play that back to see what it looks like. You're really just teaching them that you can modify things in the inspector. Then you can right click over it and you'll create a transition preset, and you can call it whatever you like. And then you'll show them where it's located in the effects library. This is different than in Resolve 14. Now it has its own little section. You can go all the way down the bottom, and underneath your video transitions, you're going to have user transitions, and it's going to have these little yellow icons that show you. These kind of yellow icons indicate that these are transitions you created, and you want to make sure that they understand that these are the transitions that they created. So what we're going to do is right click over and say set as standard transition, and then that's the transition that you'll always get whether you go up to the menu and say add transition or Command T or Control T on Windows. The next transition we do is right from the effects library. So we have our jump cut, and you'll see it's the previous red marker. So you can go to the jump cut here and tell them a way to fix it is to use smooth cut. So you can either find smooth cut, it's at the top, or you can search for it using this little search icon. Once you find it, you're just gonna drag it and drag it on top. Smooth cut, it works best when it's under 4 frames. So you can either drag it right here in the timeline, or you can go up to the inspector and you can say how many frames and just type in 4 or 3, whatever you like to try. Give it a second to cache, and then you can play it. And you can see it works pretty well. It is an improved smooth cut over the previous version. The next thing you're going to want to talk about is Resolve effects. And we're going to come over to the Bay Area shot. It's the last marker. Add Resolve effects here. And you can talk about open effects. Here are all of the Resolve effects that come with Resolve, as well as any third-party plugins that you might have installed on your system. So if we want to take one and we use the tilt shift blur, because it's a nice effect on the shot, but also if you're not using Studio and you're using the free version, it will come up with a little dialogue that tells you this is part of a studio version, you have to buy it. Here we're on studio, so you could just, and if you are as well, you can just come in and have them move things around, change the blur strength, just so they can play around with it a little bit. But definitely tell them about the trash icon to remove the filter. So we'll remove the filter there. Then we move on to reframing shots, and we start with the reframing by going over to the very first interview clip. So we're just going to come back. You'll see in the first interview clip it says resize and reframe. And for this, what we want to do is I'm going to close my effects library just to give myself more room. And I'm going to come up to the timeline, and I'm going to choose output blanking. I'm going to choose 239. And that puts a nice letterbox around him, but it does cut off his head. So I'm going to select the clip, and then I'm going to come over to my inspector, and my position Y is up and down. I'm just going to come into Y and just drag it to the left until I see enough headroom on him that I'm happy with the shot, the framing of the shot. So I'm going to select my first clip where I applied the change in transform on the Y, and I'm going to say copy. And then I'm going to select all the remaining interview clips in my timeline, of which there are 3 other ones, 2 in the middle and 1 at the end. And I'm going to choose paste attributes. Then on the attributes, I'm just going to select what I want to paste. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to paste position, and I'm going to apply it. And now as I drag through, I see that he's reframed on all of his shots. The next thing we go into is keyframing, and it's a very simple keyframe job. What we're going to do is we're going to do this shot here that we had the effect on. We're going to select it, and we're going to zoom in. You want to zoom in enough so that it's not fills the whole timeline, but it's pretty close to it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use the on-screen controls. Click them on. You can see the on-screen controls just to scale up the shot. It doesn't really matter at this point where your playhead is when you do this. You're just showing them on-screen controls and the ability to scale. And it's nice to have the inspector open because then you can see that you scaled it up a certain amount. I'm just below 1.2, and that's probably a good place to do it. Now, what we're going to do is move in about a third of the way into this clip. And I'm going to add on a keyframe. And what that does, that sets a keyframe at this point in time. This is where I'm not going to change any parameters. I'm just turning on keyframes. It sets a keyframe at my playhead, and this is where I'm going to start to scale down. This is where my animation starts. So I don't have to do anything. The first third is just going to be held at a certain scale level, and then at this point in the keyframe, it's going to start to zoom down. So I'm going to move now to about a third of the way from the end of the clip, and I'm going to change this zoom parameter to 1, and I can just click on it and enter 1. And now I've zoomed back. So now I've set another keyframe right here for this level. So it's going to zoom back until it reaches that and then hold it, right? Now, if you want to shift or adjust these keyframes, this is where you're going to open up the keyframe editor. And down in the lower right-hand corner of this clip, you're going to see the little diamond icon to represent the keyframe track. You're going to open that up, and you see this has a keyframe track, and these 2 white keyframes show you the position of where the first keyframe is, and as it scales back, where the scaling ends on the second keyframe. So I can shift these to make this happen earlier, and this is no particular area that you're going to drag this to. You can just drag it anywhere you like to have it take longer to scale. It doesn't have to go all the way to the beginning or all the way to the end, but just show them how to move it. That's all you're really doing. And now you've extended the time it takes to scale down, right? Now this is a very linear move. There's no ease in, ease out on it. To do an ease in, ease out, you're going to choose that second button in the clip in the lower right hand corner. That's going to open up the curve editor. And so to add an ease in, ease out, you have these buttons up the top. And you're just going to come down and select one of them and click the ease out. Then you'll see you'll get a little handle. Then select the last one and select an ease in, and you'll see the handle. And now when you play this back, you'll have a smoother start and end to that animation. And then you're just going to close up the tracks, and that's all you're going to do there. The last little bit you're going to talk about is caching and speed changes. So you're going to talk about speed changes. You can talk about those first. We'll go back to this shot here of our Milky Way. Let's say we wanted to, this happens too fast and it also happens in the wrong direction. Maybe we want to slow it down and we want to do it in reverse. So you're going to show them two ways to do the speed changes. The first way you're going to do it is the change clip speed. You're going to right click, choose change clip speed. You're going to say, here's the speed. We're going to make this 50% and then just change it. And now when you play it, you'll see that there's a little icon down on the clip that shows you that you change the speed, and you can play it and it plays back slower. And then you go on and you say, okay, but what if you wanted to change the duration of the clip? You can do that as well using the retime controls. Retime controls add the speed bar up the top. If you move your cursor over to the upper right hand corner, now you can trim this and you're changing the duration, right? So you show them the number down the bottom and you can say you're expanding the duration of this clip. You're not changing the frames that were in this clip, you're just stretching them out or making them play back faster. And since we are on the selection tool, I'm overwriting the clip after it, or I'm opening up a gap. But if I move this to the trim tool and now do that same thing, now I'm ripple trimming, right? Probably not something you want to do at this one, so we're just going to trim it out a little bit, about 30%. You can also come down to this little drop down menu right next to the number, and you have a pop-up menu where you can say change the speed to a certain value, or you can say reset, or in our case what we can say is reverse the segment. And now you can see the arrows pointing in the opposite direction, so now it plays back slower and in the opposite direction. And this is where you can start to talk about the processing of retiming. So down in the inspector you have your retime and scale section, you have a retime process, nearest, frame blend, and optical flow. So you can talk about the differences there. We're going to choose optical flow. And for this, what you're going to do is this is going to introduce caching, right? So we're going to come up under playback. You're going to talk about the render cache and turn on smart. It's going to turn this to be red in the timeline and then blue so you can play it back. And you can see how smooth it is. And if you want to, you can make another change to show it red and show how quickly it will then cache, and then play it back. And that's where you'll go up to your project settings, and in your master settings you're going to come down to the section where it says optimize media and render cache and talk about the background caching. And if you want to make it quicker, you can say let's cache in 3 seconds, and the format, the render cache format that you might want to use for different reasons. If you want it to go faster and compressing, you don't want to take up too much space with your render caches, you can set it to a codec that doesn't take up a lot of room. If you're finishing and you want to get the best quality, you might choose a 444 type of codec. So depending on kind of what stage you're in or how your workflow is, you'll choose a different compression format. The default is a ProRes 422 type codec, at least on the Mac, and on Windows it's an equivalent 10-bit codec. And then you can just save it, and that is the end of this lesson.